read again some fairy tale from Hans Christian Andersen, and yesterday I simply saw that the continuous of the story that we read yesterday is The Ugly Duckling. It seems cute, so we will read first this one. If you are ready and cozy, put yourself comfortable and just listen to me. The Ugly Duckling, 1843. It was so beautiful. I must say that today I have bought my lenses, contact lenses, so I can read well. It was so beautiful out on the country. It was summer. The wheat fields were golden. The woods were green, perfect as now that is summer. And down among the green meadows, the hay was stacked. There the stork minced about on his red legs, clucking away in Egyptian, which was the language his mother had taught him, so they are in Egypt. Round about the field and meadowlands rose vast forests in which deep lakes lay hidden. Yes, it was indeed lovely out there in the country. In the midst of the sunshine, there stood an old manor house that had a deep moat around it. From the walls of the manor, right down to the water's edge, great burdock leaves grew, and there were some so tall that little children could stand upright beneath the biggest of them. In the wilderness of leaves, which was as dense as the forest itself, a duck sat on her nest, hatching her ducklings. She was becoming somewhat weary, because sitting such a dull business, and scarcely anyone came to see her. The other ducks would much rather swim in the moat than waddle out and squat under the burdock leaf to gossip with her. But at last the eggshells began to crack, one after another. Peep, peep, said the little things as they came to life, and poked out their heads. Quack, quack, said the duck, and quick as quick can be, they all waddled out to have a look at the green world under the leaves. Their mother let them look as much as they pleased, because green is good for the eyes. How wide the world is, said all the young ducks, for they certainly had much more room now than they had when they were in their eggshells. Do you think this is the whole world? Their mother asked. Why, it extends on and on, clear across to the other side of the garden, and right on into the parson's field, though that is further than I ever been. I do hope you are all hatched, she said as she got up. No, not quite all. The biggest egg still lies here. How much longer is this going to take? I am really rather tired of it all, she said, when she settled back on her nest. Well, how goes it? Asked an old duck, who came to pay her a call. It takes a long time with that one egg, said the duck on the nest. It won't crack. But look at the others. They are the cutest little ducklings I've ever seen. They look exactly like their father, the wretch. He hasn't come to see me at all. Let's have a look at the egg that won't crack, the old duck said. It's a turkey egg, and you can take my word for it. I was fooled like that once myself. What trouble and care I had with those turkey children, for I may as well tell you, they are afraid of the water. I simply could not get them into it. I quacked and snapped at them, but it wasn't a bit of use. Let me see the egg. Certainly it's a turkey egg. Let it lie, and go teach your other children to swim. Oh, I sit a little longer. I've been at it so long already that I may as well sit here half the summer. Sweet yourself, said the old duck, and away she waddled. At last the big egg did crack. Peep, said the young one, and out it tumbled. But he was so big and ugly. The duck took a look at him. That's a frightfully big duckling, she said. doesn't look the least like the others. Can he really be a turkey baby? Well, well, I'll soon find out. Into the water he shall go, even if I have to shove him in myself. Next day, the weather was perfectly splendid, and the sun shone down on all the green burdock leaves. The mother duck led her whole family down to the mud. Splash! She took to the water. Quack, quack, said she, and one duckling after another plunged in. The water went over their heads, but they came up in a flash and floated to perfection. Their legs worked automatically, and they were all there in the water. Even the big, ugly grey one was swimming along. Why, that's not Turkey, she said. See how nicely he uses his legs, and how straight he holds himself. He's my very own son after all, and quite good looking if you look at him properly. Quack, quack, come with me. I'll lead you out into the world and introduce you to the duck yard. But keep close to me so that you won't get stepped on, and watch out for the cat. Thus they sailed into the duckyard, where all was in an uproar because two families were fighting over the head of an eel. But the cat got it after all. You see, that's the way of the world. The mother duck licked her bill because she wanted the eel's head for herself. Steer your legs, boost all about, and mind that you bend your necks to that old duck over there. She's the noblest of us all, and a Spanish blood in her. That's why she's so fat. See that red rag around her leg? That's a wonderful thing, distinction a duck can get. It shows that they don't want to lose her, and that she's to have special attention from man and beast. Shake yourselves, don't turn your toes in. A well-bred duckling turns his toes way out, just as his father and mother do, this way. So then, now duck your necks and say quack. They did as she told them, but the other ducks around them looked on and said right out loud, See here, must we have this brood too, just as if there weren't enough of us already. And fie, what an ugly-looking fellow the duckling is. We won't stand for him. One duck charged up and bit his neck. Let him alone, his mother said. He isn't doing any harm. Possibly not, said the duck who bit him, but he's too big and strange, and therefore he needs a good whacking. What nice-looking children you have, mother, said the old duck with the rag around her leg. They are all pretty, except that one. Didn't come out so well. It's a pity you can't touch him again. That can be managed, your ladyship, said the mother. He isn't so handsome, but he's as good as can be, and he swims just as well as the rest. Or, I should say, even a little better than they do. I hope his looks will improve with age, and after a while he won't seem so big. He took too long in the egg, and that's why his figure isn't all that it should be. She pinched his neck and preened his feathers. Moreover, he's a drake, so it won't matter so much. I think he will be quite strong, and I'm sure he will amount to something. The other ducklings are pretty enough, said the old duck. Now make yourself right at home, and if you find an ill set, you may bring it to me. So they felt quiet at home, but the poor duckling, who had been the last one out of his egg, and who looked so ugly, was pecked and pushed about, and made fun of by the ducks and the chickens as well. He's too big, said they all. The turkey gobbler, who thought himself an emperor because he was born wearing spurs, puffed up like a ship under full sail, and bore down upon him, gobbling and gobbling until he was red in the face. The poor duckling did not know where he dare stand, or why he dare walk. He was so sad because he was so desperately ugly, and because he was the laughing stock of the whole barnyard. He wasn't ugly, poor one. Oh, I have to sneeze. Sorry. So, he went on the first day, and after that, things went from bad to worse. duckling was chased and buffeted about by everyone. Even his own brothers and sisters abused him. Oh, they would always say, how I wish the cat would catch you, you ugly thing. Poor. And his mother said, how I do wish you were miles away. Poverino. The ducks nipped him, and the hens pecked him, and the girl who fed them kicked him with her foot. So he ran away and he flew over the fence. The little birds in the bushes darted up in a fright. That's because I'm so ugly, he thought, and closed his eyes. But he ran on just the same until he reached the great marsh where the wild ducks lived. There he lay all night long, weary and disheartened. When morning came, the wild ducks flew up to have a look at their new companion. What sort of creature are you? They asked, as the duckling turned in all directions, bowing his best to them all. You're terribly ugly, they told him, but that's nothing to us so long as you don't marry into our family. Poor duckling! Marriage certainly had never entered his mind. All he wanted was for them to let him lie among the reeds and drink a little water from the marsh. There he stayed for 2 whole days. Then he met 2 wild geese, or rather wild ganders, for they were maids. They had not been out of the shell very long, and that's what made them so sure of themselves. Say there, comrade, they said, you're so ugly that we have taken a fancy to you. Come with us and be a bird of passage. In another marsh nearby, there are some fetching wild geese, all nice young ladies who know how to quack. You're so ugly that you completely turn their heads. Bing, bang! Shots rang in the air, and these 2 ganders fell dead among the reeds. Oh my god! The water was red with their blood. Bing, bang! The shots rang, and as small flocks of wild geese flew up from the reeds, another volley crashed. A great hunt was in progress. The hunters lay under cover all around the marsh, and some even perched on branches of trees that overhung the reeds. Blue smoke rose like clouds from the shade of the trees and drifted far out over the water. The bird dogs came splash, splash through the swamp, bending down the reeds and the rushes on every side. This gave the poor duckling such a fright that he twisted his head about to hide it under his wing. But at that very moment, a fearfully big dog appeared right beside him. His tongue lolled out of his mouth, and his wicked eyes glared horribly. He opened his white jaws, flashed his sharp teeth, and splash, splash, on he went without touching the duckling. Thank heavens, he sighed. I'm so ugly that the dog won't ever bother to bite me. He lay perfectly still, while the bullets splattered through the reeds. Shot after shot was fired. It was late in the day before things became quiet again, and even then, the poor duckling didn't dare move. He waited several hours before he ventured to look about him, and then he scurried away from that marsh as fast as he could go. He ran across fields and meadows. The wind was so strong that he had to struggle to keep his feet. Late in the evening, he came to a miserable little oval, so ramshackle that he did not know which way to tumble, and that was the only reason he still stood. The wind struck the duckling so hard that the poor little fellow had to sit down on his tail to withstand it. The storm blew stronger and stronger, but the duckling noticed that one hinge had come loose and the door hung so crooked that he could squeeze through the crack into the room, and that's just what he did. Here lived an old woman with her cat and a wren. The cat, whom she called Sonny, could arch his back, purr, and even make sparks, though for that you had to stroke his foot the wrong way. The hen had short little legs, so she was called Cheeky Short Leg. She laid good eggs, and the old woman loved her as if she had been her own child. In the morning they were quick to notice the strange duckling. The cat began to purr, and the hen began to cluck. What on earth? The old woman looked around, but she was short-sighted, and she mistook the duckling for a fat duck that had lost its way. That was a good catch, she said. Now I shall have duck eggs, unless it's a drake. We must try it out. So the duckling was tried out for 3 weeks, but no one egg did he lay. In this house the cat was master and the hen was mistress. They always said, "We and the world," for they thought themselves half of the world and much the better half at that. The duckling thought that there might be more than one way of thinking, but the hen would not hear of it. "Can you lay eggs?" she asked. "No." "Then be so good as to hold your tongue." The cat asked, "Can you arch your back, purr or make sparks?" "No." "Then keep your opinion to yourself when sensible people are talking." The duckling sat in a corner, feeling most despondent. Then he remembered the fresh air and the sunlight. Such a desire to go swimming on the water possessed him that he could not help telling the hen about it. "What on earth has come over you?" the hen cried. "You haven't a thing to do, and that's why you get such silly notions. Lay us an egg, or learn to purr, and you'll get over it." "But it's so refreshing to float on the water," said the duckling. "So refreshing to feel it rise over your head as you dive to the bottom." "Yes, it must be a great pleasure," said the hen. "I think you must have gone crazy." "Ask the cat, who's the wisest fellow I know, whether he likes to swim or dive down in the water." Of myself, I say nothing, but ask the old woman, our mistress. There's no one on earth wiser than she is. Do you imagine she wants to go swimming and feel the water rise over her head? "You don't understand me," said the duckling. "Well, if we don't, who would? Surely you don't think you are cleverer than the cat and the old woman, to say nothing of myself. Don't be so conceited, child. Just thank your Maker for all the kindness we have shown you. Didn't you get into this snug room and fall in with people who can tell you what's what? But you are such a numbskull that it's no pleasure to have you around. Believe me, I tell you this for your own good. I say unpleasant truths, but that's the only way you can know who are your friends. Be sure now that you lay some eggs. See to it that you learn to purr or to make sparks." "I think I better go out into the wide world," said the duckling. "Sweet yourself," said the hen. So off went the duckling. He swam on the water and dived down in it, but still he was lighted by every living creature because of his ugliness. Autumn came on. The leaves in the forest turned yellow and brown. The wind took them and whirled them about. The heavens looked cold as the low clouds hung heavy with snow and hail. Perched on the fence, the raven screamed, "Caw, caw!" and trembled with cold. It made one shiver to think of it. Pity the poor little duckling. One evening, just as the sun was setting in splendor, a great flock of large, handsome birds appeared out of the reeds. The duckling had never seen birds so beautiful. They were dazzling white, with long, graceful necks. They were swans. They uttered a very strange cry as they unfurled their magnificent wings to fly from this cold land, away to warmer countries and to open waters. They went up so high, so very high, that the ugly little duckling felt a strange uneasiness come over him as he watched them. He went around and around in the water like a wheel. He craned his neck to follow their course, and gave a cry so shrill and strange that he frightened himself. Oh, he could not forget them, those splendid happy birds. When he could no longer see them, he dived to the very bottom, and when he came up again, he was quite beside himself. He did not know what birds they were, or whither they were bound. yet he loved them more than anything he had ever loved before. It was not that he envied them, for how could he ever daydream of wanting their marvelous beauty for himself? He would have been grateful if only the ducks would have tolerated him, the poor ugly creature. The winter grew cold, so bitterly cold that the duckling had to swim to and fro in the water to keep it from freezing over. But every night, the hole in which he swam kept getting smaller and smaller. Then he froze so hard that the duckling had to paddle continuously to keep the crackling ice from closing in upon him. At last, too tired to move, he was frozen fast in the ice. Early that morning, a farmer came by, and when he saw how things were, he went out on the pond, broke away the ice with his wooden shoe, and carried the duckling home to his wife. There the duckling revived, and when the children wished to play with him, he thought they meant to hurt him. Terrified, he fluttered into the milk pail, splashing the whole room with milk. The woman screamed and threw up her hands as he flew into the butter tube, and then in and out of the milk barrel. Imagine what he looked like now. The woman screamed and lashed out at him with the fire tongs. The children tumbled over each other as they tried to catch him, and they laughed and they shouted. Luckily, the door was open, and the duckling escaped through into it, the bushes, where he lay down in the newly fallen snow, as if in a daze. But he would be too sad to tell of all the hardships and wretchedness yet to endure during this cruel winter. When the warm sun shone one more, the duckling was still alive among the reeds of the marsh. The larks began to sing again. It was beautiful springtime. Then, quite suddenly, he lifted his wings. They swept through the air much more strongly than before, and their powerful strokes carried him far. Before he quite knew what was happening, he found himself in a great garden where apple trees bloomed. The lilacs filled the air with sweet scent and hung in clusters from long green branches that bent over a winding stream. Oh, but it was lovely here in the freshness of spring. From the thicket before him came three lovely white swans. They ruffled their feathers and swam lightly in the sun's came upon him. I shall fly near these royal birds, and they will peck me to bits because I, who am so very ugly, dare to go near them. But I don't care. Better be killed by them than to be nipped by the ducks, pecked by the ants, kicked about by the yard girl, or suffer some misery in winter. So he flew into the water and swam toward the splendid swans. They saw him and swept down upon him with their rustling feathers raised. "Kill me," said the poor creature, and he bowed his head down over the water to wait for death. But what did he see there, mirrored in the clear stream? He beheld his own image, and he was no longer the reflections of a clumsy, dirty grey bird, ugly and offensive. He himself was a swan. Being born in a duckyard does not matter, if only you are hatched from a swan's egg. He felt quite glad that he had come through so much trouble and misfortune, for now he had a fuller understanding of his own good fortune and of beauty when he met with it. The great swans swam all around him and stroked him with their bills. Several little children came into the garden to throw grain and bits of bread upon the water. The smallest child cried, "It's a new one," and the other rejoiced. "Yes, a new one has come." They clapped their hands, danced around, and ran to bring their father and mother, and they threw bread and cake upon the water, while they all agreed, "The new one is the most handsome of all, he's so young and so good looking." The old swans bowed in his honor. Then he felt very bashful and tucked his head under his wing. He did not know what this was all about. He felt so very happy, but he wasn't at all proud, for a good heart never grows proud. He thought about how he had been persecuted and scorned, and now He heard them all call him the most beautiful of all beautiful birds. The lilacs dipped their clusters into the stream before him, and the sun shone so warm and so heartening. He rustled his feathers and held his slender neck high as he cried out with a full heart, I never dreamed there could be so much happiness when I was the ugly duckling. Poverino. That's what it is. Let's find a cute one. This is the story of the frozen magician. The Snow Queen. The elf mound. Because I want a happy story. Some of them are they are a little bit. Well, you know what? Let's read this one of the Snow Queen. Oh, there was even written. Okay, I'm ready. Wait, I stretch my leg. Okay, we are ready. The Snow Queen is being written in 1844, a tale in 7 stories. First story, which has to do with a mirror and its fragments. Now then, we will begin. When the story is done, you shall know a great deal more than you do now. That you do know. It was a terribly bad hobgoblin, a goblin of the very wickedest sort, and in fact, he was the devil himself. One day, the devil was in a very good humor because he had just finished a mirror that had this peculiar power. Everything good and beautiful that was reflected in it seemed to dwindle to almost nothing at all, while everything that was worthless and ugly became more conspicuous and even uglier than ever. In this mirror, the loveliest landscapes looked like boiled spinach, and the very best people became idiots, or stood on their heads and had no stomach. Their faces were distorted beyond any recognition, and if a person had a freckle, he was sure to spread until he covered both nose and mouth. I wish it was a happy story. That's very funny, said the devil. If a good pious thought passed to anyone's mind, he showed it in the mirror as a carnal grin, and the devil laughed aloud at his ingenious invention. All those who went to the hobgoblin school, for he had a school of his own, told everyone, let me think. Dunque, that a miracle had come to pass. Now, they asserted, for the very first time, you could see how the world and its people really looked. They scurried about with the mirror, until there was not a person alive nor a land on earth dare not being distorted. Then they wanted to fly up to heaven itself, to scoff at the angels and our Lord. The higher they flew with the mirror, the wider it grinned. They could hardly manage to hold it. Higher they flew, and higher still, nearer to heaven and the angels. Then the grinning mirror trembled with such violence that it slipped from their hands and fell to the earth, where it shattered into hundreds of millions of billions of bits, or perhaps even more. And now it caused more trouble than it did before it was broken, because some of the fragments were smaller than a grain of sand, and these went flying through the wide world. Once they got in people's eyes, they would stay there. These bits of glass distorted everything the people saw and made them see all the bad side of things, for every little bit of glass kept the same power that the whole mirror had possessed. A few people even got the glass splinter in their hearts, and that was a terrible thing, for it turned their hearts into lumps of ice. Some of the fragments were so large that they were used as window panes, but not the kind of window through which you should look at your friends. Other pieces were made into spectacles, and evil things came to pass when people put them on to see clearly and to see justice done. The, the, fi- the find was so tickled by it all that he laughed till his sides were sore. But fine bits of the glass are still flying through the air, and now you shall hear what happened. Second story, a little boy and a little girl. In the big city, it was so crowded with houses and people that few found room for even a small garden, and most people had to be content with a flower pot. But two poor children who lived there managed to have a garden that was a little bigger than a flower pot. These children were not brother and sister, but they loved each other just as much as if they had been. Their parents lived close to one another in the garrets of two adjoining houses, where the roofs met and where the rain gutter ran between the two houses. Their two small windows faced each other. One had only to step across the rain gutter box in which they planted vegetables for their use, and a little rosebud too. Each box had a bush which thrived to perfection. Then it occurred to the parents to put these boxes across the gutter, where they very nearly reached from one window to the other, and looked exactly like two walls of flowers. The pea plants hung down over the boxes, and the rose bushes threw out long sprays that framed the windows and bent over toward each other. It was almost like a little triumphal arch of greenery and flowers. The boxes were very high, and the children knew that they were not to climb about on them, but they were often allowed to take their little stools out on the roof under the roses, where they had a wonderful time playing together. Winter, of course, put an end to this pleasure. The windows often frosted over completely, but they would eat copper pennies on the stove and press these hot coins against the frost-coated glass. Then they had the finest of peepholes, as round as a ring, and behind them appeared a brightly friendly eye, one at each window. It was the little boy and the little girl who peeped out. His name was Gay, and hers was Gerda. With one skip, they could join each other in summer, but to visit together in the winter time, they had to go all the way downstairs in one house and climb all the way upstairs in the other. Outside, the snow was whirling. See the white bees swarming, the old grandmother said. Do they have a queen bee too? The little boy asked, for he knew that real bees have one. Yes, indeed they do, the grandmother said. She flies in the thick of the swarm. She is the biggest bee of all. and can never stay quietly on the earth, but goes back again to the dark clouds. Many a wintry night she flies through the streets and peers in through the windows. Then they freeze over in a strange fashion, as if they were covered with flowers. Oh yes, we seen that, but the children said, and so they knew it was true. Can the Snow Queen come in here? The little girl asked. Well, let her come, cried the boy. I will put her on the hot stove and melt her. But grandmother stroked his head and told them other stories. That evening, when little Kay was at home and half ready for bed, he climbed on the chair by the window and looked out through the little peephole. A few snowflakes were falling, and the largest flake of all alighted on the edge of one of the flower boxes. This flake grew bigger and bigger, until at last it turned into a woman who was dressed in the finest white gauze that looked as if it had been made from millions of star-shaped flakes. She was beautiful and she was graceful, but she was eyes, shining, glittering eyes. She was alive, for all that, and her eyes sparkled like two bright stars, but in them there was neither rest nor peace. She nodded toward the window and beckoned with her hand. The little boy was frightened, and as he jumped down from the chair, it seemed to him that a huge bird flew past the window. The next day was clear and cold. Then the snow thawed, and springtime came. The sun shone, the green grass sprouted, swallows made their nest, windows were thrown open, and once again the children played in their little roof garden, high up in the rain gutter on top of the house. That summer the roses bloomed their splendid best. The little girl had learned a hymn in which there was a line about roses that reminded her of their own flowers. She sang it to the little boy, and he sang it with her. Where roses bloom so sweetly in the vale, that there shall you find the child without fail. The children held each other by the hand, kissed the roses, looked up at the clear sunshine, and spoke as if the child were there. What glorious summer days those were, and how beautiful it was out under those fragrant rose bushes that seemed as if they would never stop blooming. Kay and Gerda were looking at the picture book of birds and beasts one day. And it was then, just as the clock in the church tower was striking 5, that Kay cried, "Oh, something hurt my heart, and now I got something in my eye." The little girl put her arm around his neck, and he blinked his eye. No, she couldn't see anything in it. "I think it's gone," he said. But it was not gone. It was one of those splinters of glass from the magic mirror. You remember that goblin's mirror, the one that made everything great and good that was reflected in it appear small and ugly, but that magnified all evil things until each blemish loomed large. Poor Kay, a fragment pierced his heart as well, and soon it will turn into a lump of ice. The pain had stopped, but the glass was still there. "Why should you be crying?" he asked. "It makes you look so ugly. There's nothing the matter with me." And suddenly he took it into his head to say, "Ah, that rose is all worn eaten, and look, this one is crooked, and these roses, they are just as ugly as they can be. They look like the boxes they grow in." He gave the boxes a kick and broke off both of the roses. "Kay, what are you doing?" the little girl cried. When he saw how it upset her, he broke off another rose and then leaped home through his own window, leaving dear little Gerda all alone. Afterwards, when she brought out her picture book, he said it was fit only for babes in the cradle, and whenever grandmother told stories, he always broke in with a "but." If he could manage it, he would steal behind her, perch a pair of spectacles on his nose, and imitate her. He did this so cleverly that he made everybody laugh, and before long he could mimic the walk and the talk of everyone who lived on that street. Everything that was odd or ugly about them Kay could mimic, so well that people said, "That boy has surely got a go ahead on him." But it was the glass in his eye and the glass in his heart that made him tease even little Gerda, who loved him with all her soul. Now his games were very different from what they used to be. They became more sensible. When the snow was flying about one wintry day, he brought a large magnifying glass out of doors and spread the tail of his blue coat to let the snowflakes fall on it. "Now look through the glass," he told Gerda. Each snowflake seemed much larger and looked like a magnificent flower or a 10-pointed star. It was marvelous to look at. "Look how artistic," said Kay. "They are much more interesting to look at than real flowers, for they are absolutely perfect. There isn't a flaw in them until they start melting." A little while later, Kay came down with his big gloves on his hands and his sled on his back. Right in Gerda's ear, he bawled out, "I've been given permission to play in the big square where the other boys are." And away he ran. In the square, some of the more adventuresome boys would tie their little sleds on behind the farmers' carts to be pulled along for quite a distance. It was wonderful. It was wonderful sport. While the fun was at its height, a big sleigh drove up. It was painted entirely white, and the driver wore a white, shaggy fur cloak and a white, shaggy cap. As the sleigh drove twice around the square, Kay quickly hooked his little sled behind it, and down the street they went, faster and faster. The driver turned around in a friendly fashion and nodded to Kay, just as if they were old acquaintances. Every time Kay started to unfasten his little sleigh, his driver nodded again, and Kay held on, even when they drove right out through the town gate. Then the snow began to fall so fast that the boy could not see his hands in front of him as they sped on. He suddenly let go the slack of the rope in his hands in order to get loose from the big sleigh. But it did no good. His little sled was tied on securely, and they went a little like the wind. He gave a loud shout, but nobody heard him. The snow whirled, and the sleigh flew along. Every now and then he gave a jump, as if he were clearing hedges and ditches. The boy was terror-stricken. He tried to say his prayers. All he could remember was his multiplication tables. The snowflakes got bigger and bigger, until they looked like big white ants. All of a sudden, the curtain of snow parted, and the big sleigh stopped, and the driver stood up. The fur coat and the cap were made of snow, and it was a woman, tall and slender, and blinding white. She was the Snow Queen herself. "We have made good time," she said. "Is it possible that you tremble from cold? Crawl under my bear coat." She took him up in the sleigh beside her, and as she wrapped the fur about him, he felt as if he were sinking into a snowdrift. I guess that the author that wrote Narnia take idea from this. "Are you still cold?" she asked, and kissed him on the forehead. Brrr, that kiss was colder than ice. He felt it right down to his heart, half of which was already an icy lump. He felt as if he were dying, only for a moment. Then he felt quite comfortable and no longer noticed the cold. "My sled! Don't forget my sled!" It was the only thing he talked of. They tied it to one of the white ants, which flew along after them with the sled on his back. The Snow Queen kissed Kay one more, and then he forgot little Gerda and grandmother and all the others at home. "You won't get any more kisses now," she said. or else I shall kiss you to death." Kay looked at her. She was so beautiful, a cleverer and prettier face he could not imagine. She no longer seemed to be made of ice, as she had seemed when she sat outside his window and beckoned to him. In his eyes she was perfect, and she was not at all afraid. He told her how he could do mental arithmetic even with fractions, and that he knew the size and populations of all the countries. She kept on smiling, and he began to be afraid that he did not know as much as he thought he did. He looked up at the great big space overhead, as she flew with him high up on the black clouds, while the storm whistled and roared, as if he were singing old ballads. They flew over forests and lakes, over many a land and sea. Below them the wind blew cold, wolves howled, and black crows screamed as they skimmed across the glittering snow. But up above, the moon shone bright and large, and on it Kay fixed his eyes throughout that long, long winter night. By day he slept at the feet of the Snow Queen. Third story: The Flower Garden of the Woman Skilled in Magic. How did little Gerda get along when Kay did not come back? Where could he be? Nobody knew. Nobody could give them any news of him. All that the boy could say was that they had seen him hitch his little sled to a fine big sleigh, which had driven down the street and out through the town gate. Nobody knew what had become of Kay. Many tears were shed, and little Gerda sobbed hardest of all. People said that he was dead, that he must have been drowned in the river not far from town. Ah, how gloomy those long winter days were! But spring and its warm sunshine came at last. "Kay is dead and gone," little Gerda said. "I don't believe it," said the sunshine. "He's dead and gone," she said to the swallows. "We won't believe it," they sang. Finally, little Gerda began to disbelieve it too. One morning she said to herself, "I'll put on my new red shoes, the one Kay has never seen, and I'll go down by the river to ask about him." It was very early in the morning. She kissed her old grandmother, who was still asleep, but put on her red shoes, and all by herself she hurried out through the town gate and down to the river. "Is it true that you have taken my old little playmate? I give you my red shoes if you will bring him back to me." It seemed to her that the waves nodded very strangely, so she took off her red shoes, which were her dearest possession, and threw them into the river. But they fell near the shore, and the little waves washed them right back to her. It seemed that the river could not take her dearest possession, because it did not have little Kay. However, she was afraid that she had not thrown them far enough, so she clambered into a boat that lay among the reeds, walked to the end of it, and threw her shoes out into the water again. But the boat was not tied, and her movements made it drift away from the bank. She realized this and tried to get ashore, but by the time she reached the other end of the boat, it was already more than a yard from the bank, and was fast gaining speed. Little Gerda was so frightened that she began to cry, and no one was there to hear her except the sparrows. They could not carry her to land, but they flew along the shore twittering, "We are here, here we are," as if to comfort her. The boat drifted swiftly down the stream, and Gerda sat there quite still, in her stocking feet. Her little red shoes floated along behind, but they could not catch up with her, because the boat was gathering headway. It was very pretty on both sides of the river, where the flowers were lovely, the trees were old, and the hillsides afforded pasture for cattle and sheep. But no, not one single person did Gerda see. "Perhaps the river will take me to little Kay," she thought, and that made her feel more cheerful. She stood up and watched the lovely green banks for hours after hour. Then she came to a large cherry orchard, in which there was a little house with strange red and blue windows. It had a thatched roof, and outside it stood two wooden soldiers, who presented arms to everyone who sailed past. Gerda thought they were alive, and called out to them, but of course they did not answer her. She drifted quite close to them, as the current drove the boat toward her bank. Gerda called out even louder, and an old woman came out of the house. She leaned on a crooked stick. She had on a big sun hat, and on it were painted the most glorious flowers. "You poor little child," the old woman exclaimed. "However did you get lost on this big swift river, and however did you drift so far into the great white world?" The old woman waded right into the water, caught hold of the boat with her crooked stick, pulled it into the shore, and lifted little Gerda out of it. Gerda was very glad to be on dry land again, but she felt a little afraid of the strange old woman, who said to her, "Come and tell me who you are and how you got here." Gerda told her all about it. The woman shook her head and said, And when Gerda had told her everything and asked if she hadn't seen little Kay, the woman said he had not yet come by, but that he might be along any day now. And she told Gerda not to take it so to heart, but to taste her cherries and to look at her flowers. They were more beautiful than any picture book, and each one had a story to tell. Then she led Gerda by the hand into her little house, and the old woman locked the door. The windows were placed high up on the walls, and through the red, blue, and yellow panes the sunlight streamed in a strange mixture of all the colors there are. But on the table were the most delicious cherries, and Gerda, who was no longer afraid, ate as many as she liked. While she was eating them, the old woman combed her hair with a golden comb. Gerda's pretty hair fell in shiny yellow ringlets on either side of a friendly little face that was round and blooming as a rose. "I've so often wished for a dear little girl like you," the old woman told her. "Now you'll see how well the two of us will get along." While her hair was being combed, Gerda gradually forgot all about Kay, for the old woman was skilled in magic. But she was not a wicked witch. She only dabbled in magic to amuse herself, but she wanted very much to keep little Gerda. So she went out into her garden and pointed her crooked stick at all the rose bushes. In the full bloom of their beauty, all of them sank down into the black hearth without leaving a single trace behind. The old woman was afraid that if Gerda saw them, they would remind her so strongly of her own roses and of little Kay that she would run away again. Then Gerda was led into the flower garden. How fragrant and lovely it was! Every known flower of every season was there in full bloom. No picture book was ever so pretty and gay. Gerda jumped for joy and played in the garden until the sun went down behind the tall cherry trees. Then she was tucked into a beautiful bed under a red silk coverlet, quilted with blue violets. There she slept, and there she dreamed as gloriously as any queen on her wedding day. The next morning, she again went out into the warm sunshine to play with the flowers, and this she did for many a day. Gerda knew every flower by heart, and plentiful though they were, she always felt that there was one missing, but which one she didn't quite know. One day, she sat looking at the old woman's sonnet, and the prettiest of all the flowers painted on it was a rose. The old woman had forgotten this rose on her hat when she made the real roses disappear in the heart. But that's just the sort of thing that happens when one doesn't stop to think. Why aren't there any roses here? Said Gerda. She rushed out among the flower beds, and she looked, but there wasn't a rose to be seen. Then she sat down and cried, but the hot tears fell on the very spot where a rosebush had sunk into the ground, and when her warm tears moistened the heart, the bush sprang up again, as full of blossoms as when it disappeared. Gerda hugged it and kissed the roses. She remembered her own pretty roses and thought of little Kay. "Oh, how long I have been delayed," the little girl said. "I should have been looking for Kay. Don't you know where he is?" she asked the roses. "Do you think that he is dead and gone?" "He isn't dead," the roses told her. "We have been down in the heart where the dead people are, but Kay is not there." "Thank you," said little Gerda, who went toward the other flowers, put her lips near them, and asked, "Do you know where little Kay is?" But every flower stood in the sun and dreamed its own fairy tale or its story. Though Gerda listened to many of them, not one of the flowers knew anything about Kay. What did the tiger lily say? "Do you hear the drum? Boom, boom." It was only two notes, always boom, boom. Hear the women wail. Hear the priest chant. The Hindu woman in her long red robe stands on the funeral pyre. The flames rise around her, but the Hindu woman is thinking of that living man in the crowd around them. She is thinking of him whose eyes are burning hotter than the flames, of him whose fiery glances have pierced her heart more deeply than these flames that soon will burn her body to ashes. Can the flame of the heart die in the flame of the funeral pyre? "I don't understand that at all," little Gerda said. "That's my fairy tale," said the lily. What did the trumpet flower say? "An ancient castle rises high from a narrow path in the mountains. The thick ivy grows leaf upon leaf, where it climbs to the balcony. There stands a beautiful maiden. She leans out over the balustrade to look down the path. No rose on its stem is as graceful as she, nor is any apple blossom in the breeze so light. Hear the rustle of her silk gown, sighing. Will he never come?" "Do you mean Kay?" little girl asked. "I am talking about my story, my own dream," the trumpet flower replied. What did the little snowdrop say? "Between the trees, a bird hangs by two ropes. It is a swing. Two pretty little girls with frocks as white as snow and long green ribbons fluttering from their hats are swinging. Their brother, who is bigger than they are, stands behind them on the swing, with his arms around the ropes to hold himself. In one hand he has a little cup, and in the other a clay pipe. He is blowing soap bubbles, and as the swing flies, the bubbles float off in all their changing colors. The last bubble is still clinging to the bowl of his pipe and fluttering in the air. As the swing sweeps to and fro, a little black dog, light as a bubble, is standing on his hind legs and trying to get up in the swing. But it does not stop. High and low the swing flies until the dog loses his balance, barks, and loses his temper. They tease him, and the bubbles burst, a swinging board pictured in a bubble before it broke. That is my story. It may be a very pretty story, but you told it very sadly, and you didn't mention Kay at all. What did the hyacinth say? There were three sisters, quite transparent and very fair. One wore a red dress, the second wore a blue one, and the third went all in white. Hand in hand they danced in the clear moonlight beside a calm lake. They were not elfin folk, they were human beings. The air was sweet, and the sisters disappeared into the forest. The fragrance of the air grew sweeter. Oh my God! Three coffins in which lie the three sisters glide out of the forest and across the lake. The fireflies hover about them like little flickering lights. Are the dancing sisters sleeping or are they dead? The fragrance of the flowers says they are dead, and the evening bell tolls for their funeral. My God, you are making me very unhappy, little Gerda said. Your fragrance is so strong that I cannot help thinking of those dead sisters. Oh, could little Kay really be dead? The roses have been down under the ground, and they say no. Ding dong, tolled the hyacinth bells. We do not toll for little Kay. We do not know him. We are simply singing our song, the only song we know. And Gerda went on to the buttercup that shone among his glossy green leaves. You are like a bright little sun, said Gerda. Tell me, do you know where I can find my playmate? And the buttercup shone brightly as he looked up at Gerda. But what sort of song would the buttercup sing? It certainly wouldn't be about Kay. In a small courtyard, the sun was shining brightly on the very first day of spring. His beams glanced along the white wall of the house next door, and close by grew the first yellow flowers of spring, shining like gold in the warm sunlight. An old grandmother was sitting outside in her chair. Her granddaughter, a poor but very pretty maidservant, had just come home for a little visit. She kissed her grandmother, and there was gold, a heart full of gold in that kiss. Gold on her lips, gold in her dreams, and gold above in the morning beams. There, I've told you my little story, said the buttercup. Oh, my poor old grandmother, said Gerda. She will miss me so. She must be grieving for me as much as she did for little Kay. But I soon go home again, and I'll bring Kay with me. There's no use asking the flowers about him. They don't know anything except their own songs, and they haven't any news for me. Then she tucked up her little skirts so that she could run away faster, but the narcissus tapped against her leg as she was jumping over it. So she stopped and leaned over the tall flower. Perhaps you have something to tell me, she said. What did the narcissus say? I can see myself. I can see myself. Oh, how sweet is my own fragrance. Up in the narrow garret there is a little dancer, half dressed. First she stands on one leg, then she stands on both, and kicks her heels the whole world. She is an illusion of the stage. She pours water from the teapot over a piece of cloth she is holding. It is her bodice. Cleanliness is such a virtue. Her white dress hangs from a hook. It, too, has been washed in the teapot and dried on the roof. She puts it on and ties a saffron scarf around her neck to make the dress seem wider. Point your toes. See how straight she balances on that single stem. I can see myself. I can see myself. I'm not interested, said Gerda. What a thing to tell me about. She ran to the end of the garden, and though the gate was fastened, she worked the rusty latch until it gave way and the gate flew open. Little Gerda scampered out into the wide world in her bare feet. She looked back 3 times, but nobody came after her. At last, she could run no farther, and she sat down to rest on a big stone. And when she looked up, she saw that summer had gone by, and it was late in the fall. She could never have guessed it inside the beautiful garden, where the sun was always shining, and the flowers of every season were always in full bloom. Gracious, how long I've dallied, Gerda said. Fall is already here. I can't rest any longer. She got up to run out, but how footsore and tired she was. and how cold and bleak everything around her looked. The long leaves of the willow tree had turned quite yellow, and damp puffs of mist dropped from them like drops of water. One leaf after another fell to the ground. Only the blackthorn still bore fruit, and his fruit was so sour that it set your teeth on edge. Oh, how dreary and grey the wide world looked. Fourth story, The Prince and the Princess. The next time that Gerda was forced to rest, a big crow came hopping across the snow in front of her. For a long time he had been watching her and cocking his head to one side, and now he said, "Caw, caw, good cow day." He could not say it any better, but he felt kindly inclined toward the little girl and asked her where she was going. In the great wide world, all alone. Gerda, not Greta. Gerda understood him when he said alone, and she knew its meaning all too well. She told the crow the whole story of her life and asked if he hadn't seen Kay. The crow gravely nodded his head and cawed, "Maybe I have, maybe I have." "What, do you really think you have?" the little girl cried, and almost hugged the crow to death as she kissed him. "Gently, gently," said the crow. "I think that it may have been little Kay that I saw, but if he was, then he has forgotten you for the princess." "Does he live with a princess?" Gerda asked. "Yes, listen," said the crow. "I think that, but it's so hard for me to speak your language. If you understand the crow talk, I can tell you much more easily." "I don't know that language," said Gerda. "My grandmother knows it just as well as she knows baby talk, and I do wish I had learned it." "No matter," said the crow. "I'll tell you as well as I can, though that won't be any too good." And he told her all that he knew. "In the kingdom where we are now, there is a princess who is uncommonly clever, and no wonder. She has read all the newspapers in the world and forgotten them again. That's how clever she is. Well, not long ago, she was sitting on her throne. That's by no means as much fun as people suppose. So she fell to humming an old tune, and the refrain of it happened to run. "Why, oh, why shouldn't I get married?" "Why, that's an idea," said she, and she made up her mind to marry as soon as she could find the sort of husband who could give a good answer when anyone spoke to him, instead of one of those fellows who merely stand around looking impressive, for that is so tiresome. She had the drums drubbed to call together all the ladies in waiting, and when they heard what she had in mind, they were delighted. "Oh, we like that," they said. "We were just thinking the very same thing." "Believe me," said the crow, "every word I tell you is true. I have a tame lady love who has the run of the palace, and I had the whole story straight from her." Of course, his lady love was also a crow, for birds of a feather will flock together. The newspapers immediately came out with a border of hearts and the initial of the princess, and you could read an announcement that any presentable young man might go to the palace and talk with her. The one who spoke best and who seemed the most at home in the palace would be chosen by the princess as her husband. "Yes, yes," said the crow. "Believe me, that's as true as it is that here I sit." Men flocked to the palace, and there was much crowding and crashing, but on neither the first nor the second day was anyone chosen. Out in the street they were all glib talkers, but after they entered the palace gate, where the guardsmen were stationed in their silver-braided uniforms, and after they climbed up the staircase lined with footmen in gold-embroidered livery, they arrived in the brilliantly lighted reception halls without a word to say. And when they stood in front of the princess on her throne, the best they could do was to echo the last word of her remarks, and she didn't care to hear it repeated. It was just as if everyone in the throne room had his stomach filled with stuff and fallen asleep, for as soon as they were back in the streets, there was no stopping the talk. The line of candidates extended all the way from the town gates to the palace. I saw them myself, said the crow. They got hungry and they got thirsty, but from the palace they got nothing, not even a glass of lukewarm water. To be sure, some of the clever candidates had brought sandwiches with them, but they did not share them with their neighbors. Each man thought, just let him look hungry, then the princess won't take him. But Kay, little Kay, Gerda interrupted. When did he come? Was he among those people? Give me time, give me time. We are just coming to him. On the third day, a little person with neither horse nor carriage strode boldly up to the palace. His eyes sparkled the way yours do, and he has yet handsome long hair, but his clothes were poor. Oh, that was Kay, Gerda said, and clapped her hands in glee. Now I found him. He had a little knapsack on his back, the crow told her. Now that must have been his sled, said Gerda. He was carrying it when he went away. Maybe so, the crow said. I didn't look at it carefully, but my tame lady love told me that when he went through the palace gates and saw the guardman in silver and on the staircase the footman in gold, he wasn't at all taken aback. He nodded and he said to them, It must be very tiresome to stand on the stairs. I'd rather go inside. The halls were brilliantly lighted. Ministers of state and privy councillors were walking about barefooted, carrying golden trays in front of them. It was enough to make anyone feel solemn, and his boots creaked dreadfully, but he wasn't a bit afraid. That certainly must have been Kay, said Gerda. I know he was wearing new boots. I heard them creaking in grandmother's room. Oh, they creaked all right, said the crow, but it was little enough he cared, as he walked straight to the princess, who was sitting on a pearl as big as a spinning wheel. All the ladies in waiting, with their attendants and their attendants' attendants, and all the lords in waiting, with their gentlemen and their gentlemen, each one had his page with him, were standing there, and the nearer they stood to the door, the more arrogant they looked. The gentlemen's men's pages, who always wore slippers, were almost too arrogant to look, as they stood at the threshold. They must have been terrible, little girl exclaimed, and yet Kay won the princess. If I weren't a crow, I would have married her myself, for all that I'm engaged to another. They say he spoke as well as I do when I spoke my crow language, or so my tame lady love tell me. He was dashing and handsome, and he was not there to court the princess, but to hear her wisdom. This he liked, and she liked him. Of course he was gay, said Gerda. He was so clever that he could do mental arithmetic, even with fractions. Oh, please, take me to the palace. That's easy enough to say, said the crow. But how can we manage it? I'll talk it over with my tame lady love, and she may be able to suggest something, but I must warn you that a little girl like you will never be admitted. Oh yes, I shall, said Gerda. When Kay hears about me, he will come out to fetch me at once. Wait for me beside that stile, the crow said. He wagged his head, and off he flew. Darkness had set in when he got back. Caw, caw, he said. My lady love sends you her best wishes, and here's a little loaf of bread for you. She found it in the kitchen, where they have all the bread they need. You must be hungry. You simply can get into the palace with those bare feet. The guardsmen in silver and the footmen in gold will never permit it. But don't you cry, we'll find a way. My lady love knows of a little back staircase that leads up to the bedroom, and she knows where they keep the key to it. Then they went into the garden, and down the wide promenade, when the leaves were falling one by one. When one by one the lights went out in the palace, the crow led little Gerda to the back door, which stood ajar. Oh, our heart did beat with fear and longing. It was just as if she were about to do something wrong, yet she only wanted to make sure that this really was little Kay. Yet truly must be Kay, she thought, as she recalled his sparkling eyes and his long hair. She remembered exactly how he looked when he used to smile at her as they sat under the roses at home. Wouldn't he be glad to see her? Wouldn't he be interested in hearing how far she had come to find him, and how sad they all had been when he didn't come home? She was so frightened, and yet so happy. Now they were on the stairway. A little lamp was burning on a cupboard, and there stood the tame crow, cocking her head to look at Gerda, who made the curtsy that her grandmother had taught her. My fiancé has told me many charming things about you, dear young lady, she said. Your biography, as one might say, is very touching. Kindly take the lamp, and I shall lead the way. We shall keep straight ahead, where we aren't apt to run into anyone. It seems to me that someone is on the stairs behind us, said Gerda. Things brushed past, and from the shadows on the wall there seemed to be horses with spindly legs and waving manes. And there were shadows of huntsmen, ladies and gentlemen, on horseback. Those are only dreams, said the crow. They come to take the thoughts of the royal masters off to the chase. That's just as well, for it will give you a good opportunity to see them while they sleep. But I trust that when you rise to high position and power, you will show a grateful heart. Toot toot, you've no need to say that, said the forest crow. Now they entered the first room. It was hung with rose-colored satin, embroidered with flowers. The dream shadows were flitting by so fast that Gerda could not see the lords and ladies. All after magnificent hall, quite bewildered her, until at last they reached the royal bedroom. The ceiling of it was like the top of a huge palm tree, with leaves of glass, costly glass. In the middle of the room, two beds hung from a massive stem of gold. Each of them looked like a lily. One bed was white, and there lay the princess. The other was red, and there Gerda hoped to find little Kay. She bent one of the scarlet petals and saw the nape of a little brown egg. Surely this must be Kay. She called his name aloud and held the lamp near him. The dreams on horseback pranced into the room again as he awoke and turned his head, and he was not little Kay at all. The prince already resembled Kay about the neck, but he was young and handsome. The princess peeked out of her lily-white bed and asked what had happened. Little Gerda cried and told them all about herself and about all that the crows had done for her. Poor little thing, the prince and the princess said. They praised the crows and said they weren't the least bit angry with them, but not to do it again. Furthermore, they should have a reward. Would you rather fly about without any responsibilities, said the princess, or would you care to be appointed court crows for life, with rights to all the scraps from the kitchen? Both the crows bowed low and begged for permanent office, for they thought of their future and said it was better to provide for their old age, as they called it. The prince got up and let Gerda have his bed. It was the utmost that he could do. She clasped her little hands and thought how nice the people and the birds are. She closed her eyes, fell peacefully asleep, and all the dreams came flying back again. They looked like angels, and they drew a little sled on which Kay sat. He nodded to her, but this was only in a dream, so it all disappeared when she woke up. The next day, She was dressed from her head to her ears in silk and in velvet too. They asked her to stay at the palace and have a nice time there, but instead she begged them to let her have a little carriage, a little horse, and a pair of little boots, so that she could drive out into the wide world to find the key. They gave her a pair of boots and also a muff. They dressed her as nicely as could be, and when she was ready to go, there at the gate stood a brand new carriage of pure gold. On it, the coat of arms of the prince and the princess glistened like a star. The coachman, the footmen, and the postilions, for postilions they wore golden crowns. The prince and the princess themselves helped her into the carriage and wished her Godspeed. The forest crow, who was now a married man, accompanied her for the first 3 miles and sat beside Gerda, for it upset him to ride backward. The other crow stood beside the gate and waved her wings. She did not accompany them because she was suffering from a headache brought on by eating too much in her new position. Inside, the carriage was lined with sugared cookies, and the seats were filled with fruit and gingerbread. fare well, called the prince and princess. Little Gerda cried, and the crow cried too, for the first few miles. Then the crow said goodbye, and that was the saddest leave-taking of all. He flew up into a tree and waved his big black wings as long as he could see the carriage, which flashed as brightly as the sun. Fifth part, The Little Robber Girl. Here we go. The carriage rolled on into a dark forest. Like a blazing torch, it shone in the eyes of some robbers. They could not bear it. That's gold, they cried. They sprang forward, seized the horses, killed the little postilions, the coachman, and the footman, and dragged little Gerda out of the carriage. Every time that the story goes well, then they write something bad. How plump and how tender she looks, just as if she been fattened on nuts, cried the old robber woman. She had a long bristly beard and long eyebrows that hung down over her eyes. She looks like a fat little lamb. What a dainty dish she will be. As she said this, she drew out her knife, a dreadful flashing thing. Ouch! The old woman howled. At just that moment, her own little daughter had bitten her ear. The little girl, whom she carried on her back, was a wild and reckless creature. You beastly brat, her mother exclaimed, but it kept her from using the knife on Gerda. She shall play with me, said the little robber girl. She must give me her muff and that pretty dress she wears, and sleep with me in my bed. And she again gave her mother such a bite that the woman hopped and whirled around in pain. All the robbers laughed and shouted, See how she dances with her brat. I want to ride in the carriage, the little robber girl said, and ride she did, for she was too spoiled and headstrong for words. She and Gerda climbed into the carriage, and away they drove over stumps and stones into the depths of the forest. The little robber girl was no taller than Gerda, but she was stronger and much broader in the shoulders. Her skin was brown and her eyes coal black, almost sad in their expression. She put her arms around Gerda and said, They shan't kill you unless I get angry with you. I think you must be a princess. No, I'm not, said little Gerda, and she told about all that had happened to her, and how much she cared for little Kay. The robber girl looked at her gravely, gave a little nod of approval, and told her, Even if I should get angry with you, they shan't kill you, because I'll do it myself. Oh my God. Then she dried Gerda's eyes and stuck her own hands into Gerda's soft, warm mouth. The carriage stopped at last in the courtyard of a robber's castle. The walls of it were cracked from bottom to top. Crows and ravens flew out of every loophole, and bulldogs huge enough to devour a man jumped high in the air. But they did not bark, for that was forbidden. In the middle of the stone-paved, smoky old hall, a big fire was burning. The smoke of it drifted up to the ceiling, where it had to find its own way out. Soup was boiling in a big cauldron, and hares and rabbits were roasting on the spit. "Tonight you shall sleep with me and all my little animals," the robber girl said. After they had something to eat and drink, they went over to a corner that was strewn with rags and straw. On sticks and perches around the bedding roosted nearly 100 pigeons. They seemed to be asleep, but they stirred just a little when the two little girls came near them. "They are all mine," said the little robber girl. She seized the one that was nearest to her, held it by the legs, and shook it up until it flapped its wings. "Kiss it," she cried, and thrust the bird in Gerda's face. "Those two are the wild rascals," she said, pointing up the wall to all barred with wooden sticks. "Rascals of the woods they are, and they will fly away in a minute if they were not locked up. And here is my old sweetheart, Baya," she said, pulling at the horns of a reindeer that was tethered by a shiny copper ring around his neck. "We have to keep a sharp eye on him, or he will run away from us too. Every single night I tickle his neck with my knife blade, for he is afraid of that." From a hole in the wall she pulled a long knife, and rubbed it against the reindeer's neck. After the poor animal had kicked up its heels, the robber girl laughed and pulled Gerda down into the bed with her. "Are you going to keep the knife in bed with you?" Gerda asked, and looked at it a little frightened. "I always sleep with my knife," the little robber girl said. "You never can tell what may happen. But let's hear again what you told me before about little Kay, and about why you are wandering through the wide world." Gerda told the story all over again, while the wild pigeons cooed in their cage overhead, and the tame pigeons slept. The little robber girl clasped one arm around Gerda's neck, gripped her knife in the other hand, fell asleep, and snored so that no one could hear her. But Gerda could not close her eyes at all. She did not know whether she was to live or whether she was to die. The robbers sat around their fire, singing and drinking, and the old robber woman was turning somersaults. It was a terrible sight for a little girl to see. Then the wood pigeon said, "Coo, coo, we have seen little Kai." A white hen was carrying his sled, and Kai sat in the Snow Queen's sleigh. They swooped low over the trees where we lay in our nest. The Snow Queen blew upon us, and all the young pigeons died, except us. Coo, coo. "What is that you are seeing up there?" cried Gerda. "Where was the Snow Queen going? Do you know anything about it?" "She was probably bound for Lapland, where they always have snow and ice. Why don't you ask the reindeer who is tethered beside you?" "Yes, there is ice and snow in that glorious land," the reindeer told her. "You can prance about freely across those great glittering fields. The Snow Queen has her summer tent there, but her stronghold is a castle up nearer the North Pole, on the island called Spitsbergen." "Oh, Kai, little Kai," Gerda sighed. "Lie still," said the robber girl, "or I stick my knife in your stomach." In the morning, Gerda told her all that the wood pigeons had said. The little robber girl looked quite thoughtful. She nodded her head and exclaimed, "Leave it to me, leave it to me." Do you know where Lapland is? She asked the reindeer. Who knows it better than I? The reindeer said, and his eyes sparkled. There I was born, there I was bred, and there I kicked my heels in freedom across the fields of snow. Listen, the robber girl said to Gerda. As you see, all the men are away. Mother is still here, and here she'll stay. But before the morning is over, she will drink out of that big bottle, and then she usually dozes off for a nap. As soon as that happens, I will do you a good turn. She jumped out of bed, rushed over, and threw her arms around her mother's neck, pulled at her beard bristles, and said, Good morning, my dear Nanny Goat. Her mother thumped her nose until it was red and blue, but all that was done out of pure love. As soon as the mother had tipped up the bottle and dozed off to sleep, the little robber girl ran to the reindeer and said, I have a good notion to keep you here and tickle you with my sharp knife. You're so funny when I do, but never mind that. I'll untie your rope and help you find your way outside so that you can run back to Lapland. But you must put your best leg forward and carry this little girl to the Snow Queen Palace, where her playmate is. I suppose you heard what she told me, for she spoke so loud and you were eavesdropping. The reindeer was so happy that he bounded into the air. The robber girl hoisted little Gerda on his back, carefully tied her in place, and even gave her a little pillow to sit on. I don't do things halfway, she said. Here, take back your fur boots, for it's going to be bitter cold. I'll keep your muff, because it's such a pretty one, but your fingers mustn't get cold. Here are my mother's big mittens, which will come right up to your elbows. Pull them on. Now your hands look just little like my ugly mother's big paws. And Gerda shed happy tears. I don't care to see you blubbering, said the little robber girl. You ought to look pleased now. Here, take these two loaves of bread and this ham along so that you won't starve. When these provisions were tied on the back of the reindeer, the little robber girl opened the door and called in all the big dogs. Then she cut the tether with her knife and said to the reindeer, Now run, but see that you take good care of the little girl. Gerda waved her big mittens to the little robber girl and said goodbye. Then the reindeer bounded away, over stumps and stones, straight through the great forest, over swamps and across the plains, as fast as he could run. The wolves howled, the ravens shrieked, and kershaw, kershaw, the red streaks of light ripped through the heavens with a noise that sounded like sneezing. Those are my old northern lights, said the reindeer. See how they flash. And on he ran, faster than ever. By night and day, the loaves were eaten, and the whole ham was eaten. And there they were in Lapland. 6 part, the Lap woman and the Finn woman. Oh my God. Okay. They stopped in front of the little hut, and a makeshift dwelling it was. The roof of it almost touched the ground, and the doorway was so low that the family had to lie on their stomachs to crawl in it or out of it. No one was at home except an old Lap woman who was cooking fish over a whale oil lamp. The reindeer told her Gerda's whole story, but first he told his own, which he thought was much more important. Besides, Gerda was so cold that she couldn't say a thing. Oh, you poor creatures, the Lap woman said. You've still got such a long way to go. Why, you will have to travel hundreds of miles into the Finnmark, for it's there that the Snow Queen is taking a country vacation and burning her blue fireworks every evening. I jot down a message on a dried codfish, for I haven't any paper. I want you to take it to the Finn woman who lives up there. She will be able to tell you more about it than I can. As soon as Gerda threw it out and had had something to eat and drink, the Lapp woman wrote a few words on a dried codfish, told Gerda to take good care of it, and tied her again on the back of the reindeer. Off he ran, and all night long the skies crackled and swished as the most beautiful northern lights flashed over their heads. At last they came to the Finn mark and knocked at the Finn woman's chimney, for she hadn't a sign of a door. It was so hot inside, the Finn woman went about almost naked. She was small and terribly dowdy, but she at once helped little Gerda off with her mittens and boots and loosened her clothes. Otherwise, the heat would have wilted her. Then the woman put a piece of ice on the reindeer's head and read what was written on the codfish. She read it 3 times, and when she knew it by heart, she put the fish into the kettle of soup, for they might as well eat it. She never wasted anything. The reindeer told her his own story first, and then little Gerda. The Finn woman winked a knowing eye, but she didn't see anything. "You are such a wise woman," said the reindeer. "I know that you can tie all the winds of the world together with a bit of cotton thread. If the sailor unties one knot, he gets a favorable wind. If he unties another, he gets a stiff gale. While if he unties the third and fourth knots, such a tempest rages that it flattens the trees in the forest. Won't you give this little girl something to drink that will make her as strong as 12 men, so that she may overpower the Snow Queen?" 12 strong men, the Finn woman sniffed. "Much good that will be." She went to the shelf, took down a big rolled up skin, and unrolled it. On this skin strange characters were written, and the Finn woman read them until the sweat rolled down her forehead. The reindeer again begged her to help Gerda, and little Gerda looked at her with such tearful, imploring eyes that the woman began winking again. She took the reindeer aside in a corner, and while she was putting another piece of ice on his head, she whispered to him, "Little Kai is indeed with the Snow Queen, and everything there just suits him fine. He thinks it is the best place in all the world, but that's because he has a splinter of glass in his heart and a small piece of it in his eye. Unless this can be gotten out, he will never be human again, and the Snow Queen will hold him in her power. But can't you fix little Gerda something to drink that will give her more power than all those things?" "No power that I could give could be as great as that which she already has. Don't you see how much men and beasts are compelled to serve her, and how far she has come in the wide world since she started out in her naked feet? We mustn't tell her about this power. Strength lies in her heart, because she is such a sweet, innocent child. She herself cannot reach the Snow Queen and rid little Kay of those pieces of glass, then there's no help that we can give her. The Snow Queen garden lies about 8 miles from here. You may carry the little girl there and put her down by the big bush covered with red berries that grows on the snow. Then don't you stand there gossiping, but hurry to get back here." The Finn woman lifted little Gerda onto the reindeer, and he galloped away as fast as he could. "Oh," cried Gerda, "I forgot my boots and I forgot my mittens." She soon felt the need of them in that knife-like cold, but reindeer did not dare to stop. He galloped on until they came to the big ash that was covered with red berries. Here he set Gerda down and kissed her on the mouth while big shining tears ran down his face. Then he ran back as fast as he could. Little Gerda stood there without boots and without mittens, right in the middle of Ice Finnmark. She ran as fast as ever she could. A whole regiment of snowflakes swirled toward her, but they did not fall from the sky, for there was not a cloud up there, and the northern lights were ablaze. The flakes skirmished along the ground, and the nearer they came, the larger they grew. Gerda remembered how large and strange they had appeared when she looked at them under the magnifying glass. But here they were much more monstrous and terrifying. They were alive. They were the Snow Queen's advance guard, and their shapes were most strange. Some looked like ugly, overgrown porcupines. Some were like a knot of snakes that stuck out their heads in every direction, and others were like fat little bears, with every hair a bristle. All of them were glistening white, for all were living snowflakes. It was so cold that as little Gerda said the prayer, she could see her breath freezing in front of her mouth, like a cloud of smoke. It grew thicker and thicker, and took the shape of little angels that grew bigger and bigger the moment they touched the ground. All of them had helmets on their heads, and they carried shields and lances in their hands. All of them had helmets on their hands. Okay. Rank upon rank they increased, and when Gerda had finished their prayer, she was surrounded by a legion of angels. They struck their dread snowflakes with their lances and shivered them into 1,000 pieces. Little Gerda walked on, unmolested and cheerful. The angels rubbed their hands and feet to make them warmer, and she trotted briskly along the Snow Queen palace. But now let us see how little Kay was getting on. Little Gerda was furthest from his mind, and he hadn't the slightest idea that she was just outside the palace. Seventh part: what happened in the Snow Queen's palace and what came of it. It's a long story, but we must finish it by now. So, the walls of the palace were driven snow. The windows and doors were the knife-edged wind. There were more than 100 halls, shaped as the snow had drifted, and the largest of these extended for many a mile. All were lighted by the flare of the northern lights. All of the halls were so immense and so empty, so brilliant and so glacial. There was never a touch of gaiety in them, never so much as a little dance for the polar bears, at which the storm blast could have served for music, and the polar bears could have waddled about on their hind legs to show off their best manners. There was never a little party with such games as blind bear's puff, or hide the paw kerchief for the cubs, nor even a little afternoon coffee, over which the white fox, vixen, could gossiped. Empty, vast, and frigid were the Snow Queen's halls. The northern lights flared with such regularity that you could time exactly when they would be at the highest and lowest. In the middle of the vast, empty hall of snow was a frozen lake. It was cracked into 1,000 pieces, but each piece was shaped so exactly like the others that it seemed a work of wonderful craftsmanship. The Snow Queen sat in the exact center of it when she was at home, and she spoke of this as sitting on her mirror of reason. She said this mirror was the only one of its kind and the best thing in all the world. Little Kay was blue, yes, almost black, with the cold, but he did not feel it, because the Snow Queen had kissed away his eyes' tremblings, and his heart itself had almost turned to ice. He was shifting some sharp, flat pieces of ice to and fro, trying to fit them into every possible pattern, for he wanted to make something with them. It was like the Chinese puzzle game that we play at home, juggling little flat pieces of wood about into special designs. Kay was cleverly arranging his pieces in the game of ice cold reason. To him, the patterns were hardly remarkable. And of the utmost importance. The second that I saw that my phone is a little bit to lose the charge. So we must change a little bit the position. Hold on a second. Wait for me a second. I must put it to charge. Okay. Okay. So we came a long way, but now we have to finish this story. All right. There you go. Put you a little helper here. So. Here we go. It was like the Chinese puzzle game that we play at home, juggling little flat pieces of wood about into special designs. Kay was cleverly arranging his pieces in the game of ice cold reason. To him, the patterns were highly remarkable and of the utmost importance, for the chip of glass in his eye made him see them that way. He arranged his pieces to spell out many words, but he could never find the way to make the one word he was so eager to form. The word was eternity. The Snow Queen had said to him, "If you can puzzle that out, you shall be your own master, and I give you the whole world and a new pair of skates." But he could not puzzle it out. "Now I am going to make a flying trip to the warm countries," the Snow Queen told him. "I want to go and take a look into the black cauldron." She means the volcanoes of Etna and Vesuvius. I must widen them up a bit. They need it, and it will be such a relief after all those yellow lemons and purple grapes. and away she flew. Kay sat all alone in that endless, empty, frigid hall, and puzzled over the pieces of ice, until he almost cracked his skull. He sat so stiff and still that one might have thought he was frozen to death. All of a sudden, little Gerda walked up to the palace through the great gate that was a knife-edged wind. But Gerda said her evening prayers. The wind was lulled to rest, and the little girl came on into the vast, cold, empty hall. Then she saw Kay. She recognized him at once. And ran to throw her arms around him. She held him close and cried, Kay, dearest little Kay, I found you at last. But he sat still and stiff and cold. Gerda shed hot tears, and when they fell upon him, they went straight into his heart. They melted the lump of ice and burned away the splinter of glass in it. He looked up at her, and she sang, Where roses bloom so sweetly in the vale, there shall you find the child without fail. Kay burst into tears. He cried so freely that the little pieces of glass in his eye was washed right out. Gerda! He knew her and cried out in his happiness, My sweet little Gerda, where have you been so long, and where have you been? He looked around him and said, How cold it is there! It is here. How enormous and empty! He held fast to Gerda, who laughed until happy tears rolled down her cheeks. Their bliss was so heavenly that even the bits of glass danced about them and shared in their happiness. When the pieces grew tired, they dropped into a pattern that made the very word that the Snow Queen had told Kay he must find before he became his own master and received the whole world and a new pair of skates. Gerda kissed his cheeks, and they turned pink again. She kissed his eyes, and they sparkled like hers. She kissed his hands and feet, and he became strong and well. The Snow Queen might come home now whenever she pleased, for there stood the order for Kay's release, written in letters of shining eyes. Hand in hand, Kay and Gerda strolled out of that enormous palace. They talked about grandmother and about the roses on their roof. Wherever they went, the wind died down and the sun shone out. When they came to the bush that was covered with red berries, the reindeer was waiting to meet them. He had brought along a young reindeer maid who had warm milk for the children to drink and who kissed them on the mouth. Then this reindeer carried Gerda and Kay first to the thin woman. They warmed themselves in her hot room, and when she had given them directions for their journey home, they rode onto the lap woman. She had made them new clothes and was ready to take them along in her sleigh. Side by side, the reindeer ran with them to the limits of the North Country, where the first green buds were to be seen. Here they said goodbye to the two reindeer and to the lap woman. Farewell, they all said. Now the first little birds began to chirp, and there were green buds all around them in the forest. Through the woods came riding a young girl on a magnificent horse that Gerda recognized, for he had once been harnessed to the golden carriage. The girl wore a bright red cap on her head and a pair of pistols in her belt. She was the little robber girl who had grown tired of staying at home and who was setting out on a journey to the North Country. If she didn't like it there, why, the world was wide, and there were many other places where she could go. She recognized Gerda at once, and Gerda knew her too. It was a happy meeting. You're a fine one for gadding about, she told the little Kay. I just like to know whether you deserve to have someone running to the end of the earth for your sake. But Gerda patted her cheek and asked her about the prince and the princess. They are traveling in foreign lands, the girl told her. And the crow? Oh, the crow is dead, she answered. His tame lady love is now a widow, and she wears a bit of black wool wrapped around her leg. She takes great pity on herself, but that's all stuff and nonsense. Now tell me what has happened to you and how you coped up with Kay. Gerda and Kay told her their story. Snip, snap, snore, bust, lure, said the robber girl. So everything came out all right. She shook them by hand and promised that if ever she passed through their town, she would come to see them, and then she rode away. Kay and Gerda held each other by the hand, and as they walked along, they had wonderful spring weather. The land was green and strewn with flowers, church bells rang, and they saw the high steeples of a big town. It was the one where they used to live. They walked straight to grandmother's house and up the stairs and into the room where everything was just as it was when they left it, and the clock said tick-tock and its hands were telling the time. But the moment they came into the room, they noticed one change. They were grown up now. The roses on the roof looked in at the open window, and their two little stools were still out there. Kay and Gerda sat down on them and held each other by the hand. Both of them had forgotten the icy, empty splendor of the Snow Queen's palace as completely as if it were some bad dream. Grandmother sat in good sunshine, reading to them. Except you become as little children, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Kay and Gerda looked into each other's eyes, and at last they understood the meaning of the old hymn. Where roses bloom so sweetly in the vale, there shall you find the child without fail. And they sat there, grown up but children, still children at heart. And it was summer, warm, glorious summer. It was a long story, but really cute. Hope you enjoyed it, and thank to have stayed with me all the time. So if it's night, good night and sweet dreams. See you next time.